And now if I press tab, look at this. And now if I press tab, look at this. And then press tab, look at this. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Sumit from Backbench Coder. So this video is all about Emmet. If you don't know about Emmet, Emmet is a plugin that is used to write high-speed code in HTML, XML and of course JSX. And it is available for almost all the decent code editors as an extension. So just download this from your code editor extensions and install that. I am using VS Code, so Emmet comes pre-installed in VS Code. Now here's a note guys, I'll be showing you all the implementation of Emmet in a HTML file, but this is exactly same if you want to use this to write JSX, and Emmet will also change the class to class name if you use Emmet to write JSX. Okay, so to get the HTML boilerplate using Emmet, we type exclamation sign and then press tab. Nice, look at this, we got the full HTML boilerplate using this single keystroke, right? I'll also make a comment at the top so that it's easy for you to remember. So to get the boilerplate, we use exclamation and then comment. Nice. Okay, now to add a class on a specific element, we use that element. So let's say I am using div and I want to add a class on that div, so I'll be using div dot, remember dot is for class, and then let's say top. So if I now press tab, look at this, it will give me a div with a class name top. Nice. Add a comment, class dot, and now to get an ID with a specific element, we'll be using hash. Okay, so div, let's make this h1, so you can use any HTML element. H1 has header. Look at this, it will give me an h1 with an ID header. So a comment ID hash. Nice. We can also create an element which has both the ID and class name. So let's say p dot paragraph. Remember dot being class, so it will give me a paragraph with a class name paragraph, and then has and the ID name is, let's say, para ID. Now if I press tab, you can also see this Emmet abbreviation which shows you the preview of the code. So now if I press tab, look at this, it will give me a class name and also an ID. Okay, so this is for class and ID, right? Now to add a type on a specific element, we use the third bracket syntax. Let me show you. So let's say I am creating a button, so button, and I want to make this button a type of submit. So third bracket type is equal to submit, and now press tab. Look at this, a button with a type submit. Okay, so let me comment it. Oops, attribute a third bracket syntax. Nice. And now how can we add a text inside this button using Emmet? So to add a text inside this button, we are going to use this second bracket, I mean that braces, curly braces. So button, and the text inside this is click me, and then press tab. Look at this. So let me make a comment. For text, use this braces. Nice. And now how can we add a child element using Emmet? So let's say I want to make a button inside this div. So div, and then we are going to use this arrow, and then let's say button. Nice. And also look at this Emmet abbreviation which says a button inside this div. Okay, now press tab. Look at this, we got a button inside this div. We can also put a child inside this button. So let's say inside this button I also want to use a span tag, and then span, and let's say the text is click me, and then press tab. Look at this, a div at the top, and then inside this a button. Just let me break this. So it's a div at the top, and then inside this div there is this button, and then inside this button there is this span which says click me. So let me make a quick comment. So for child, use this arrow. Nice. Okay, so now let's say we want to add some siblings, and what I mean by siblings, let's say inside this div I also want to add a paragraph. So paragraph like this. Okay, let's say I am a paragraph, I am para. Like look at this, inside this div there is this p tag and this button tag at the same level, right? Now this is called siblings, and how can I do this? Okay, we can do this using plus sign. Okay, so let's do this inside a div. So go inside div, and then we want to make a paragraph first. So let's say press P and then plus button. So all these plus elements are the siblings, and then inside this button I want to make a span, and then span text is click me, and press tab. Look at this. So this P and the buttons are siblings, and inside these buttons this is span. Okay, so let me write a comment. For siblings we use plus. This font seems a little bit smaller. Yeah, nice. And now we can also make grouping. So what I mean by grouping is, let's say inside this div I want 5 buttons. So inside this div I want button, but the number of buttons are 5. So I can do something like button plus button plus button, and this is for 5 times, which will eventually give me 5 buttons inside this div, but we will not use that. So we are going to use grouping. So a single button, but we want this 5 times, so into 5, and now press tab. Look at this. Look at this, 5 buttons inside a div. It's cool, right? So let me write a nice comment. For grouping we use multiplication. Nice. Okay, cool. Now we can also use variable. So let's say I want to also add a text inside this, which is first one say button 1, second one is button 2, third one button 3, fourth one button 4, and fifth one button 5. So instead of doing this manually, we can do this using Emmet. So let's see how we can do this. So inside this div we want 5 button, right? So button into 5. So this will give me 5 buttons inside a div, but we also want to change the text inside this. So first of all, to get the text we are going to use the second bracket, remember, and now we want to change this to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like we want to make this a variable. So to make this a variable we are going to use this $sign, and that's it. So now if you go to the end of this snippet and press tab, look at this. It will give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 the text inside this and the 5 buttons. You are going to use this most when you will be writing the class name. So if I press Ctrl Z and let's say just remove this, and we want to add dynamic class name on this button. So button dot, remember dot is for class name, and then the class name is button underscore this $sign. So dollar means the variable, and then the text inside this is again a dollar, again the same variable, into 5. So if I press tab, look at this. So a button with a class name button 1, the text inside this is 1, then the second button with a class name button 2, and the text inside this button 2, and so on. So let me write a quick comment. So for variable use dollar. I'll put a link of this file in the description box, so just focus on this code. Okay, so that's almost all the basics of Emmet, and now let me copy a complex snippet of HTML, and we are going to use the Emmet to write exactly the same code. So it will be fun. Okay, so we are going to write this snippet using a single line of Emmet code. Let's see. Okay, so first of all I want a div. So div with an ID, parent div ID. So div has parent div ID and also class name which is parent div. So parent div, and then inside this there is a div which has a class name child div. So let's go inside this using this arrow, and then div with a class name child div, div, and then inside this div there is this h2 pn button. So these all are the siblings. So go inside this child div and write h2 with a class name child div header, and then its sibling is this p. So plus p with a class name child div body, and another sibling which is a button. So plus button with a class name button, and it has also a type. So press third bracket and the type is equal to submit, which is an attribute, and then the text inside this is add. So second bracket add, that's the whole line. And now if I press tab, look at this, it is exactly the same of this snippet. And just let me go back and copy this line. So Ctrl J C. Okay, so I copied this so that I just make a comment. So Ctrl V. So this is my Emmet code, and this is the result of this Emmet code. Look at this, this is exactly the same code as this. Okay, cool. We are going to use 2 more complex snippets. Let me copy another one. Okay, so I got another snippet. Okay, so it is a div with a parent div id, and inside this there is this 3 div, and then in all these divs there is this h2pn button. Okay, so how can we do this? Look at this, like all these divs, like all these childs are identical. So what can I do? I can make a single div which should be our parent, and then a single child, and then just group this for 3 times. So let's do that. Div with an id parent div id, and with a class name parent div, and then inside this let's make one child which is div dot child div, and then inside this there is this 3 siblings which is h2 with a class name child div header, and for the sibling use plus, and then p dot child div body, and another button, so plus button with a class name button, with a type, so this is an attribute, and use third bracket type submit of submit, and then inside this button there is this text which is add, so add. Now we want this child for 3 times. Now how can you do this? If I now type multiplication into 3, let's see what it will give. So I just press that and look at this. It will give me 3 buttons because that grouping affected on that button, on that single button. So just Ctrl Z, and now to group this for a specific portion we are going to use the bracket. So we want this child div. Okay, so div child div dot child div to the button, so, and the end bracket on this button, and then press tab. Look at this, a div with a parent div id, then 3 div which are identical to each other. This is pretty much the same code. So just let me make a copy of that code. So Ctrl Z and comment it here. Again the code will be available in the description box, so just check this out. Just let me make the font smaller. So let me make another copy. Okay, I got this. So it's a little bit tricky because we are going to do this with a single Emmet line, right? So what the code is? So first of all we need a div with a class name div1, and then the sibling with that div is div2, and then inside this div there is a div, there is a span, and there is a second span, and inside this div there is just p tag. Okay, so let's start. First of all we need a div dot div1, remember this is a class name, and then its siblings is div2, div dot div2. Now here's a little shortcut guys. If you are going to use div, so by default Emmet gives you a div, so you can also remove this first div. So plus if you just write dot div2, it will also give you as div by default. Okay, nice. So let me rewrite this code. Just remove this. So as this is a div, so I can just write dot and div1, and then plus dot div2. That's a nice shortcut. And then inside this div2 use an arrow to go inside this, and we want a div. So, and as there is no class name or id attached with this, we need to write div, and then inside this div there is this p. And now how can we write this to span tag? We are currently at this p tag, right? We need to climb up at this div2, and then we can write this span tag. Now to climb up we are going to use this caret symbol, and now we are at this div2. So I am here right now, and then I can write span for 2 times, and remember this has also a text with a variable. So I am a span. For the text I used that braces and used a dollar into 2, and now if I press tab, look at this. And I also forgot to add that text inside this paragraph, but not a big deal. Look at this, we got 2 span and a div. So to climb up we are going to use that caret symbol. Climb up caret. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you are going to use Emmet for your next project, as I am a React guy and I use a lot of Emmet to write JSX syntax. Okay, so bye, see you in the next video.